Good morning, people out in Facebook. It is Sunday the 27th. No, it's the 26th. Or whenever you're watching these videos, I have been hearing from people that they are watching them just in their own time. So I continue to do this every day. If you are watching this in real time and want to respond to something that's said or ask a question, please feel free. Good morning, Chrissy. I think you'll like this one, actually, Chrissy. So we are doing a 4-week series of breaths once a week, as well as processing the following day, and an immersion, a half-day immersion once a month. And one of the women who I know quite well, she's a student, we've done some private sessions, and in that she was talking about how overrun she feels by her partner's need for her, particularly in the morning when she wants time for her own practice, and was for the most part speaking about that. They had a bit of a fight or something. They both came to the breath, and then at the end of the breath he left, and she reported the next day that when he left, because he didn't want to be with her and he wanted to go process his own stuff, she felt abandoned. And so I want to speak about the fear of engulfment and the fear of abandonment, and how they are really the only two programs that we have. And so I'm going to just read you a little something from my book. Unfortunately, I'm totally taking it out of context, so I'll just... the third chapter of my book tells a particular story in the time of my life between me and my parents, and it ends with I'm going through a breakup, and I'm entering my first period of self-reflection. But so I wrote, my brother was getting married, and a lot of things were happening just before the wedding, including lightning that struck my parents' house through my father's chair right about here if he had been sitting in the chair. But he got up to go to the bathroom, and he was in the middle of his own secrets. So a few weeks before the wedding, I dyed my hair black, and by the day of the wedding, it had turned red on top because of exposure to the sun. So I showed up looking every bit the rebel artist who was in the midst of a personal crisis. I proceeded to drink far too much and make a fool of myself, giving a semi-coherent speech in front of 300 people, losing my written speech on the way to the wedding, and sloppy drunk didn't help. This was 1987, so I was about 24. After this ignominious episode, I realized that the pain wasn't just going to evaporate one day, that I would instead have to face it. I decided to heed the urgings of my closest friend and get into therapy. It was the first time I ever really entered into self-reflection. The suffering made me do this. I had to admit and confront the magnitude of my suffering. I felt like I had no choice, that I could no longer try to escape my pain. The suffering was so immense that I was either going to be buried by it or closely explore it. I had to stop negotiating with myself. I began to see this epic conflict in me between the fear of abandonment and the fear of engulfment, and I could see all the ways in which I tried to avoid the fear of being abandoned and ward off losing my authentic self to the restrictions, phoniness, and pretense of familial and societal norms. I began to see more deeply and clearly into myself. So, hi Megan, good morning if you're still watching. The previous part of the story involves somebody you know. So that's interesting. And also Megan lives in Taiwan. So what I've said here at the end about, we all grow up in family and societal norms. And for those of us that choose a spiritual path, we're aware that somehow we don't fit with the system in which we are living. And that was what was happening to me. And I had, in the period of time that I'm writing about in my book, my house burned down. I had to move back in with my parents after I found out about this terrible family secret. My relationship had broken up. And I saw that one half of my life was desperately searching for love and approval from women, to validate me and to comfort me, and from men to be authority figures and people who would give me stability. But anytime I ever got in a relationship with anybody at that time, I was exactly Megan's age, I would then feel engulfed, and then it would never be enough. If I was with one relationship, I would have to leave that relationship. And so I think that there are really two programs. And one is that we want freedom and we want security. We want to be loved, and we want to be loved for all parts of ourselves. And I think that when you focus, particularly when you're younger, and in the case of my story, when you focus on fulfilling those needs through the external world, you will suffer more, because any healing or satiation around abandonment will be temporary, and any person who stabilizes you is not you stabilizing yourself. And I find this a lot with the people I work with who are younger. They really want me to be a rock and be supportive, but at the same time want to have fights with me and want to get away from me. And I think the reason is that I am a sound, grounded structure for them, but there's resentment because they don't want me to be the structure. They want to do it themselves. So just like a child, it's asking for that support and then rebelling against it. I remember when Sarisha was in preschool, my daughter, she told her mother, I hate you. Actually, she ended up writing it down when she was a little older, and I still have it. It says, I hat you, H-A-T, I hat you. Anyway, she said, I hate you. And the teacher said, that's great. When a child feels safe enough to say they hate you. And then when I had my second child, he's quite a character, my son. He was 2.5, and he ran out the front door and ran down the street to run away from home. And when I finally got him back, he said, what do I need parents for? So I think the thing is, if you're just tuning in, we all want to feel held. And so we have this fear of abandonment because there's no way that we did not experience some abandonment or emotional abandonment or physical abandonment in our life. And at the same time, in being held, we fear engulfment. We fear being trapped. And nobody doesn't have these two programs on some level, in my experience. And if you read my story, Dawn's on this. Good morning, Dawn. If you read my story in chapter 3, I just tell my own horrible, stumbling version of how I came to start to address this fear of abandonment and fear of engulfment. And the beautiful thing to me, and why I would love for you to read my book, and why I think the book is interesting, is I didn't stop at the first awakening. I didn't stop like, thank you, Chrissy. I appreciate you writing. Anybody writing anything, I'm grateful, because I don't know. I'm sitting alone here in my little cave. Anytime, people talk about awakening like it's one side of the door or the other. And I had this profound spiritual awakening in a moment when I found out this family secret. And it's part of the message of the book, is that the problem is the solution. The worst thing that happens to you is often exactly what you need to fulfill your life purpose. It certainly was for me. And then I go into the story that I ended up going into therapy in my 20s to start to look at myself. But I don't end there. As I detail the rest of the book and I tell other people's stories and I explain the process of the work, I keep going back to my story to show that I didn't stop working. I didn't heal when I first awoke to this part of myself. I had 1,000 more problems. This fear of abandonment, fear of engulfment, I think the reason why I decided to share it yesterday is it came up for me yesterday. And I thought, I'll share this because you're never not wanting structure and freedom at the same time. The contradiction of being human is individuality versus unity. I want to love you forever, two hearts beating as one. But then it's like, get away from me. Like, you find your soulmate, and then what do? You can't get rid of them for eternity. It sounds terrible. So my point is that you have to contend with this part of your humanness that wants that merging and then feels violated by it. It's part of the path. And what I share in my book is how I think you can deal with that. And one thing I'll just say is that abandonment should not be met by yes, Megan, yin and yang exist at the same time. And that's the interesting thing. The yin-yang symbol, there's a yin circle inside the yang and a yang inside the yin. So it's not even just two opposites together. It's opposites inside opposites. So the contradiction is so deep. As you are even being the one who fears abandonment, you're also being the other thing at the same time. You're always being both your opposite and the embodiment of your opposite. The yin-yang symbol is really the most beautiful symbol that literally describes the philosophy behind it. Anyway, one of the ways I think that we deal with this is consciousness and communication. We're having a conversation right now, so we get to put it out into the open and admit our contradictions. So that's number one. And number two, you can't seek satiation for abandonment from the outside world and expect it to last. The only place you want to heal abandonment is with God. Because the only place you feel separation ultimately is with the universe. You're born into duality, and your parents are God when you're born, because you do not experience separation from them. The mind doesn't develop until 4. The sense of individuating from the parents doesn't start till 7. So our abandonment starts with our parents. But if you're looking for sex or love or a mommy or a daddy or money, like it's only going to take you so far. And I think it takes many years to go through the process of suffering, seeking that. And since Megan, you're still here, we had conversations about this boy that you loved, and yes, you did do. Everybody on this thread that's had a relationship with me has done this with me. You want my support and my unconditional love, and then you want to push away from it because you don't want to have to rely on me. And it's only a reflection of your own process. And that's my point, is that this is not something to avoid or embrace. It's something to accept. And then the fear of engulfment, because I didn't say too much about that. Merging with another is very problematic. It's complex because you can have healthy attachment and you can live with somebody. You can really rely on somebody else for your well-being. Like I have with Sarah, we're merged in some ways. But there's a difference between a healthy merging and and an unhealthy merging. But I think when you're in intimate relationships, sexual relationships, exchanging fluid, or exchanging money, or living together, or having children, it gets very complicated to experience that level of oneness while still maintaining an individuated self. Ultimately, and this is where I think a lot of people are, hi Molly, thank you. Oh, I really appreciate that. I think this is where spirituality is total rubbish and bullshit in the West. I think it's changed a lot in the last 5 years, but a lot of people seek spirituality because they're looking for this transcendent experience. They want to go to God. They want to go to that fourth level of existence, to live in the spirit, in their spirit body. But we come here to have human experiences, and the problem is that merging. I'm just looking for the way I want to say this. A lot of times people use the relationship of merging to think in some way that they're in oneness with God. This idea of twin flames and soulmates. It's like, we want to be in the oneness of all beings because we're all one, we're all God, we're all the same. It's true as an absolute truth, but as a relative truth, it's not, because Molly's in Savannah, and Megan's in Taiwan, and Chrissy's in England, and Tim's in Boston, and I'm in California. Like, we're separate in the relative reality, and therefore you have to live your human life. You're a drop of water in the ocean. I'm a drop of water. If you try to only just be the ocean, maybe that's your karma to do that this life, to just become Buddha. But for the rest of us, we have to learn what it means to be our individuated self. And when we merge too much with other people, often it is a great avoidance. I would even argue, since you're all listening and I'm being super Sagittarian opinionated today, I think that polyamory can be, because I know Molly and Don are listening and they know something about sacred intimacy. But polyamory, at least the way I've experienced it in California, is often the same version of total merging. It lacks a kind of accountability. It's like you have to be the human being you are meant to be. And that is unique, and it is individual, and it's different. That's why we live different places. We look different. We have different preferences. Right now, even on this thread, we've got we got races and different nationalities. It's our job to become who we are. And if too much time is spent merging with people, or too much time saying, I'm not going to merge at all, I think the yin yang is about that perfect balance between parts. So today, or whatever time it is, Megan, you're up late, 1 a.m. Whatever you're thinking, think about where your fear of abandonment lies and where your fear of engulfment lies. And I would argue, if any of you, are not a part of our group breaths, our weekly breaths with processing, you should join us, because there's nothing more powerful than the breath work to help you to heal the issue of abandonment and engulfment. And that's every Wednesday. We're processing on Thursday, and we do a half-day immersion. Thank you all for listening. I started out with 1 and ended up with 7, so that was sweet. I hope you have a great Sunday. I want to say I have bitten the bullet. My ex-wife is coming over today to pick up my son. She's going to cut my hair. I vowed never to have my ex-wife have sharp objects around me, but I really need a haircut. Day 43, quarantine. Love you all. Bye.